How do you know if you're fat adapted? I mean, actually in ketosis, deep ketosis. And I'm going to go over that right now through all the fireworks on the 4th. Welcome, everyone, to my very humble life where right now there's fireworks just going off like crazy because it's the 4th of July, 2024. And Deo, my dog, doesn't give a shite. He's sleeping through all the pops and the loud stuff. The horses, not so much. They're okay with the little crack-a-lackin' here and there. But when they start going like crazy, they ran to the forest at the top of the hill. So I want to get through this video before my air conditioning kicks back on. How do you know if you are in ketosis? Well, what's the deal? A lot of people are very confused. I still get the questions of people trying to understand what fat adapted means. Now, for years, I've been teaching a ketogenic diet, lifestyle, whatever. Fasting came around, carnivore came around, snake diet came around, cyclic keto, all this weird stuff came around. But the reality is that being in ketosis is when your body has learned how to use ketones as your primary source of fuel rather than glucose, blood sugar. Now, even if you are in ketosis, you're still going to use blood sugar. You don't have to eat a single carbohydrate, sugar, nothing. You can eat straight fat and still have a insulin and glucose spike. That comes from gluconeogenesis, which I've spoken about ad nauseum, which is a breakdown of amino acids to raise your blood sugar through cortisol. Yes. The problem is that people tend to not understand how to get into ketosis or if they are actually ketotic. It is not easy to get into ketosis. In fact, it's easy to pop out and it's very hard to pop back into. There is no such thing as cyclic ketogenic anything. A lot of people are doing carnivore where they're like, oh, for 3 days I'll have fruit. And then for another couple of days, I'll have high protein. And then I'll have high fat. And I'm like, good luck with that. Because the body doesn't understand what fuel source to use. Once you add fruit, which is fruit and carnivore is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And people are still doing it. Why are people adding fruit? Well, they're adding fruit because their electrolytes tanked or their blood sugar's all over the place, or they have no energy and they're losing muscle or strength. But fruit will also make you hit a wall. That's what people don't understand. But let's get back to getting into ketosis. To get into ketosis, there can be no fruit 1 week and then high protein the next. It's always going to be high fat first, then protein, and then a little wee bit of carbohydrate. And to be ketotic, you have to, if you're going to have carbohydrates, it's got to be things like cruciferous vegetables or the brassica family. That's broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus, cabbage, Brussels sprouts. Once you get towards vegetables with less fiber like green, zucchini, squash, you're going to raise the carbohydrate content. The type of vegetables that I think in very small amounts, you can have it 3 days a week, would be leek, the green part, spring onions, spring, not the bulb ones, the green part, leek. These are perfect. They're actually perfectly aligned with being ketotic and also helping stabilize your gut microbiome because they are prebiotic fibers. Now you're going to get a little bit in your cruciferous brassica, but much more in particular vegetables. If you have problems with vegetables because you see it in your poop, you don't have to eat much. You can do a tablespoon for 3 days or do a tablespoon every other day until that gut wall begins to seal up and your histamine you're able to disperse your histamine and get rid of it through diamine oxidase production. But with that said, how do you know if you're in ketosis? The only way is if you're eating high fat all the time, period. It's not only about the diet, it's also about your lifestyle. Because you can make sugar through gluconeogenesis, which I've made a video about. And you can have high blood sugar with not eating 1 drop of a carbohydrate. That means you're going through the whole adrenal stress. Now there's emotional stress, but there's also environmental stress, and then there's physical stress. And if you are too high on those 3 arenas, you can't get into ketosis. Your blood sugar is going to do this, and if it does this, you can make ketones for a couple of hours, or you can make ketones for 20 minutes, or you can just make ketones and never use them, or you cannot make ketones at all. But because you actually use your glucometer and your ketones are at 2.8, that doesn't mean you're in ketosis. You actually can lose ketones via the urine. You have to make sure that you are keeping you have to make sure that you are keeping your blood sugar incredibly stable. That's going to bed early. That's chewing your food so slow, because the faster you chew, the more you don't break it down. You're going to have an inflammatory response in the small intestine, because things have to be chomped down to chyme so they can be digested more easily through the small intestine. And when you don't do that, often people are losing proteins, they're feeling bloated, they're not digesting their fats very well. You have to eat food so slow to fix the gut wall, sometimes I cannot talk, to then make the ketones, because if you have leaky gut so severe, those ketones are not going to be stable. You're going to lose a lot of them because of the leaking gut, or if the microvilli are broken down on your small intestinal wall. Remember, you have to have clear urine strip, ketones between a 1.8 and a 3.0 on your blood glucometer, only tested in the morning for days on end. But the most important thing is that your blood sugar is stable, because if your blood sugar is stable, you're not in ketosis. So what does it feel like to actually be ketotic most of your day, day after day after day? And what makes you get there? Because that's how you stay young and not go into gluconeogenesis to the point where you start breaking down collagen and start affecting your thyroid and the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis, and tanking your reproductive hormones and starting to store fat. How do you avoid that? Because being ketotic is everything. When you're in ketosis, the body stops eating itself for fuel. Like when you fast, when you do OMAD. I had a consultation with a guy today that he thought that fasting created autophagy. And I'm like, you can't measure autophagy. It's just a theory. But really, when you're fasting, how is your body getting the electrolytes that it needs? And how's your body getting the energy or the tools to fix the car? Because you're going these long windows without eating foods that, let's say, have potassium in them. Or just energy. But like I was saying before, how you know you're in ketosis is that your energy is very, very stable. The hypoglycemia or dysglycemia goes away. Your thyroid can now start to function, right? T4 is converted into T3, the active form of the thyroid hormone. Your temperature regulates, your inflammation goes down, your bloat goes down, your sleep is rock star, and your body stops eating itself to stabilize blood sugar. That's what you don't want to do. You don't want your blood sugar to swing, right? Because when it swings, then insulin begins to oversecrete, and then glucagon can't bring you back up to baseline, and all your markers are all over the place in terms of cortisol, or let's say your reproductive hormones, or your thyroid hormones, everything goes out of whack, and your sleep hormones, when you cannot get yourself in a homeostatic balance. How do you do this? I know I've said this before, and that's a fly. You go to bed extra early. You got to eat 200 to 300 grams of fat a day, of animal fat, on your plate. Monounsaturated fats like avocados and olive oil, they're not going to put you in ketosis. Now, they will tell your brain you're not starving, and you might have to use these plant fats or these monounsaturated fats for the short term if you have a gallbladder problem. But ultimately, you have to be able to digest long chain triglycerides, because that's what we're made out of. Our brain, our lungs, the lining of our cells, our reproductive hormones need cholesterol. Very, very important to get into ketosis. And the more you spread that fat throughout the day, for example, you have a breakfast, small breakfast, you have a couple of egg yolks, but you have 3 tablespoons of fat. Then 3 hours later, you have 2 tablespoons of fat. And then another 3 hours later, with, let's say, a lunch, you have 3, 4, or 5 tablespoons of fat. And then in the afternoon, you have another 2 tablespoons of fat, which is 30 grams. You do this all freaking day long. Even, let's say, if you have a breakfast and you have let's say 3 ounces of ground beef, or 4, and then you have 3 tablespoons of fat on top of that ground beef, because the white fat is also protein fibers, which is not pure fat. Then you've got, let's say, a few hours later, I'm going to have some egg yolks with 30 grams of fat, or I'm going to have some sardines. Please don't do a sardine fast. It's the dumbest thing ever invented. But you could have some sardines with 30 grams, 2 tablespoons of fat. And then you might have a lunch going and raising your protein to, it depends if you're a man or a woman, from 3 ounces to max 6. 6 is pushing it. Yes, in your main meals. When you keep your food intake stable according to the circadian rhythm and your lifestyle, and then you really learn how to breathe, you really learn how to meditate and get that cortisol down, and have that cortisol highest in the morning instead of at night, and have it not invert, then you start getting strong. Then your testosterone and estrogen, progesterone starts to balance. Then your adrenals take a break. Then you develop deep sleep. That's when you start to protect the telomeres on the ends of your DNA. You have to realize that when you eat carbs, it's like trying to heat a house with paper. It's burning really high, really fast, and then burning out. And then you crash. And then your thyroid takes a hit, or your adrenals take a hit, or your sleep takes a hit. Or you go down that cortisol pathway and pregnenolone steal starts to happen and you lose DHEA. Fat, once you're fat adapted, it's like big fat logs on a fireplace, and you can leave the house and let that house burn evenly, a little lower, but for hours. And that's how you protect your skin and your organs and your brain, your mood, your everything, really. That's how you stop the aging process. Now, comment below and tell me if you're still confused. Do you think you're in ketosis? Because you're not in ketosis. You're not ketotic in a deep state of ketosis if you're in ketosis for an hour. It's got to be all day. That's why you got to measure glucose with ketones and your A1C and your insulin. Comment below, share this content. How's it going for you? What's your journey like? Are you using a glucometer or a CGM? Are you using a urine strip? Because you should never use a urine strip for your primary source of understanding if you're making ketones, because that's just showing if you are not making any or losing ketones. Comment below, share this content. My Instagram is Stephanie Ketogenic. My Facebook fan page is Stephanie the Business Person. I do run a course where it's $15 a month where I cover 3 diets on how to do it. And I am almost done fixing my mom. I got to go move her house tomorrow. And then I've got to finish framing my house. And then I'm going to finish this challenge. And I'm out. Energy at 56. And I'm almost 57. All right. Now I gotta edit this. Gotcha.